Welcome to your year 2021 Zodiac Forecast. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. I'd be honoured if you'd subscribe to my channel. Now I'm going to provide a penetrative insight for each of the 12 zodiac signs, so please stay with me for that. But just to say, if you'd like to ascend beyond your zodiac sign, which is just based on the location of the sun and how the planets interact with that, and find out what this new year will hold for you as an individual, there is nothing more accurate and telling than a personal forecast. Now you can get your 12-month personal forecast for 2021 plus a character analysis for 30% off, a special offer. Please see the link below. But also know, if you order in 2020, I'll give you the rest of 2020 free. So if you order in October, you get October, November, December, plus the following 12 months. Now your zodiac forecast is going to be of great interest to you, of course, and it does give us a fascinating insight into what we can expect. But of course, the zodiac or the horoscope contains much more information than just our sun. And that's where that personal horoscope comes in. But also, as we start each year, we have a solar return. And I want you to think of that solar return at midnight on the 1st of January 2021 as like your personal birth chart. It gives us a blueprint of what we can all expect collectively for this new year. So I'm going to share that information next. But when I go into your zodiac forecast, I'll be sharing different wheels, the different eclipses, to give you a really big opportunity to get a feel for what's coming for you. But astrology is basically the study of time. And when events happen in the past, when particular planetary alignments occur, when we look forwards to see when those alignments will happen again, it gives us a bit of a clue of what we can expect. And the fascinating thing, of course, is that as 2020 came to a close on the December, Saturn moved back into Aquarius. It had been there from the 22nd of March to the 2nd of August 2020, but it moves from the cold sign of Capricorn, which it governs in its dignity. It's the sole ruler of Capricorn, and it moved into the sign of Aquarius, where it's the co-regent along with Uranus. Now it was joined on the 20th of December by Jupiter. And then on the 21st of December, they came into a conjunction. And that conjunction is still there. It's not quite exact, but it's still there as we begin this new year. Now, what we can learn from those past events is that the last time this happened was in fact in 1405. So a very, very long time ago, and that was on the 7th of January. And I think what began at that time was the Cultural Revolution in a way. So what we can expect this year is a revolution, that's for sure. And of course we were seeing elements of that revolution beginning last year, and part of the revolution can be evolution. It doesn't always have to be turbulent, but there are certain parts of what happened in 2020 that were, of course, very turbulent. Now, the conjunction that goes between the planets of Jupiter, which is about expansion and growth and optimism, and Saturn, which is about resistance, obstacles, boundaries, tradition, usually happens just under every 20 years, about 19.8 years. This is because Jupiter takes 11.8 years to go through its cycle, and Saturn takes 29.5 years to complete its cycle. And over the last 1,000 years, predominantly, the three signs that this conjunction has occurred in most of all are of Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Pisces. So that's what makes this Aquarius conjunction so absolutely blindingly exciting. Now, it's also true to say that the eclipse cycle that we welcomed in on the 14th of December 2020 was the Saros cycle that is featuring the polar axes of Sagittarius and Gemini. Now that began on the 30th of May 1984 in the sign of Gemini with a solar eclipse. And if we look back to when eclipse cycles begin, that gives us a big idea of what they may bring in their wake. So that one had Saturn and Mars conjunct in the sign of Scorpio, very much to do with finance, but also to do with desire, could even say lust. But Saturn, of course, is about discipline, it's about those structures, and Mars, certainly in its second home zone of Scorpio, is very much about desire. So you can see that a certain amount of repression would come from that particular conjunction, but also the potential to work very hard on resources. And I think in terms of the material world, there's been a lot of development since 1984, and some people would argue a lot of growth. But on the other side of the heavens, where the eclipse occurred, not only did we have the solar eclipse in the wonderful, quick-witted Gemini, we also had Venus there, which is very flirty and alluring and attractive. But we also had Chiron, and that is the wounded healer, and that was conjunct the North Node and Venus. So for me, this pattern that we're beginning this year, or picking up the thread of, which has been rejuvenated by the solar eclipse in Sagittarius on the 14th of December, which forged an amazingly positive angle to Mars. So I think we're all going to be feeling a lot more hopeful as we come to the end of this year, because last year, 2020, was just so terribly trying. I think we are going to have a much greater sense of momentum, a much greater sense that something is shifting and moving in our consciousness, our way of being. But I think that gathering of energy back in 1984 in Gemini was really a lot to do with the way society has changed since then, not just in a material sense, but also in a social sense. So we've seen a mass transformation in the way we consume information, the media, which has come through the internet, and of course printed media has declined quite sharply, but they're very much governed by the sign of Gemini. So we could say that Chiron, the wounded healer, being in that part of the situation in conjunction with Venus, points towards a wound in what we believe in. And I think with that energy all clustered together based on universal central time in the 8th house of transformation, very Scorpionic itself, and Mars and Saturn in conjunction in Scorpio, we have had a lot of lust since 1984, and we have had a lot of challenges to ideas, because if we go back to that time, I think there was much more of an orthodox that most people were expected to fit into. People have found their voices, they expect to have their voice. Now on the other side of the heavens, with the solar eclipse that occurred on the 14th of December 2020, Sagittarius energy is about the higher principle of communication. So it's about philosophy, it's about the intellect, it's about history, travel, it's about borders. It can be about laws and regulations, but it's very much to do with trying to find the higher principles of society. And because it forged an amazing link with Mars, I think both being fire signs, after the really pulverizing difficulties of 2020, which saw the end of an eclipse cycle between the axes of Cancer, which is ruled by the moon, so that's very much to do with emotion, the family, security, the seas, the waters, if you like, and on the other side, the harsh, cold reality of business, big industries, and materialism in perhaps its most extreme form, which has battled with the need to find emotional security on the other side of the heavens in Cancer. So we've had this big battle going on over the last couple of years, which has really been very difficult. And I feel that obviously there are some institutions, some business strands, some countries which will try to withhold or to hold on to power in a very oppressive way. And on the other side of the heavens, we had the moon is the repressed emotions that have been held down for a long time, especially to do with civil rights and people speaking up much more ardently about what they want. So the Sagittarius energy that is coming along, which re-evokes that first 1984 eclipse in Gemini, when this Saros eclipse cycle began, is very much about communication and information. So this year we're going to see a lot of sharing of ideas, that's for sure. And of course, we're seeing a lot of polarization in people's viewpoints and a lot of outspoken expression of ideas, and sometimes not enough tolerance. So that's an interesting principle. So as we come into this new year, although Saturn is the co-ruler of Aquarius, and of course it was co-present with Jupiter over the last year as Jupiter made its way through the sign of Capricorn, where of course it's not at its best, it's in its fall, and we've had a fall in the stock market. And also if we look back to when Jupiter and Pluto were last together, that was in 2008 in Capricorn, we had a fall in the stock market. If we go back to that eclipse cycle beginning in 1984, guess where Jupiter was? Yes, in Capricorn. And guess what happened that year? Yes, we had a fall in the stock market. It wasn't perhaps as quite as catastrophic as 2008 or perhaps even 2020. And that might be because when Saturn and Mars are together, particularly in the sign of Scorpio, which is very much about marshalling investments and pensions and all the rest of it, I think that Saturn was probably a stabilising influence, and all that Gemini stuff was in the 8th house of business anyway. But the Dow Jones did shrink 4% in 1984, so we can see as Jupiter makes its way through Capricorn every 12 years or so, it's not for the best when it comes for finance, investment, business generally. So as we come into this new year, Jupiter and Saturn are together and they are still co-present, and some astrologers would argue therefore that because Saturn is the co-ruler of Aquarius, the traditional ruler, that some of the more cool repressive energies of Capricorn will still be to the fore. And they could be right. But for me, I think it's more about detachment. So what we're going to get over the next 2.25 years as Saturn makes its way through the sign of Aquarius is the Aquarius energies of kindness, of fairness, of truth can be melded to the more reserved nature of Saturn. So, for example, home working is very Aquarius, which has come about more because of COVID-19. It's very Aquarius, very independent. It's using technology, which Aquarius also welcomes for its modern ruler of Uranus. But in actual fact, I think it's going to lead to a lot of creeping isolation. I think people could kind of start to see that the world could become a kind of dystopianly detached place, which is not necessarily quite the utopia that people talk about for the Aquarian age. But that's where Jupiter can be a modifying influence for the cooler energies of Saturn. And I think the two together, as we turn into this new year, are going to be for the good. So this year is going to see Sagittarius and Gemini eclipse energy, apart from one lunar eclipse which will occur in the sign of Taurus. But what's really important is that Neptune, the planet of dreams, is going to be impacting all of these eclipses and also the North Node as we go through the whole of this year. The North Node is the kind of emotional direction of travel or society. It's in Gemini. It returns to 1 degree Gemini by the end of the year. But of course it's an air sign, just like Saturn and Jupiter begin the year in. So that airiness can be there, but that watery, eroding energy of Neptune can provide distortion. And I think the thing that's really going to be at stake this year, just as much as it has been in recent years, is the whole concept of the truth. You know, when we've got big media platforms saying it's not their role to govern the truthfulness or accuracy of what people say because everyone is entitled to an opinion, we're heading into really dark territory in my viewpoint. Traditional media, even if you're not a fan, has to live to certain parameters that come from regulation, even if sometimes they have stepped outside of it, probably quite often. But there is some regulation in place, whereas a lot of new media doesn't have any regulation, and that means that truth or facts get distorted to suit particular people's agendas. And I think we are going to still continue to have a lot of that in 2021. Now, the other thing that perhaps is not quite so well known is that although Jupiter will like being in Aquarius, and it is going to be much more expansive than it has been in the sign of Capricorn, it's not going to stay in Aquarius for the whole of this year. It's going to move mid-May into the sign of Pisces, and it's going to be there through to the 27th of July. Now, Jupiter, in fact, is the ruling planet or the co-ruler of Pisces, so it's returning home, and so that's an interesting one, but it does start to go into retrograde from the 20th of June for 4 months. So I think we might see a revival initially in the cruise industry by the middle of May. We might see bookings starting over again if COVID is coming back under a bit more control, as I believe it will. But I feel that once that retrograde begins, it is going to be very interesting how that affects the cruise industry. And the other thing I need to tell you is that in astrology, when we take a particular point like that solar return at the start of the year, we get a map just like your personal horoscope. And that solar return, I've created it based on universal central time. And the ascendant is actually in Libra, which is very much about finding balance. But the midpoint between the sun and the moon's in the sign of Leo as we begin this new year, and the sun will be in Capricorn as usual. So the midpoint between the two is 21 degrees in Libra. So this is going to be very much a Libran year. And 21 degrees Libra is quite a fascinating point, because it is going to be next to, or very close to, a fixed star which has the characteristic of both Saturn and Jupiter. And that fixed star is called Foramen. And Foramen is very much to do with journeys, particularly sea journeys. It's said to be broadly optimistic, but it can see passages from quite tumultuous events to much more enlightened understanding. And that seems to be where the world is at the moment. We have an opportunity to change how things are, but just finding a vaccine for COVID is not the answer. Many of us won't take it. And of course, many of us don't want to be ruled by fear, so we're going to carry on our lives. So it's an interesting fixed star to have on that midpoint, but also the midpoint is ruled in terms of the 12th harmonic, or the Dward, by the sign of Gemini. So, I'm talking about this Saros Eclipse series being very much to do with the polarities of Gemini and Sagittarius. Gemini, quick wits, communications, sharing of information, and the higher energy of Sagittarius. Now, like all zodiac signs, I'm not talking in terms of your zodiac sign or how you live within your zodiac sign, because we all have a choice to live to the best of our zodiac signs, or there is a more base instinct within each zodiac sign, and everybody has a choice. But this year predominantly is going to be about finding balance, it is going to be about communication, and it is going to be about trying to find a search for truth. Now, I mentioned before, what did I say for 2020? Well, the midpoint was actually in Aquarius, and it was conjunct Venus. And Venus in Aquarius is very much about us as a collective. And also it was in the 4th house, which is about our sense of security. But we also had Neptune conjunct the moon as the solar return began for 2020. Quite incredible. So the Neptune in the sign of Pisces, which it governs, conjunct the moon. And Neptune is very much about gases, infections. It can be about uncontainable situations. It can be about distortion. It was also potentially very much about spirituality. It's about healing. But having that conjunct the moon for the world collective, where we all found out that wherever we lived in the world, we were all connected to the same issue like never before. That's quite extraordinary. And the other thing that all astrologers knew, of course, was that we had the posse in Capricorn of Saturn, Jupiter and Pluto. So most astrologers believed that there would be a crash in the stock market, so we weren't wrong about that. But the implications of this infection, COVID-19, very much was there in the stars. So this year, you can see that Neptune energies are still going to be very important, and that potential for distortion or dishonesty, perhaps from politicians particularly, it can be to do with how information is shared on social media platforms particularly, but it can also be to do with our imagination, or that we have choices about the way we want to live our lives. But Sagittarius generally is very much about travel, and I think the travel industry will get revived this year, but I think we're going to see changes. So we're going to see more temperature tests at airports and ports. We may see some very quick COVID tests being enacted, which will give very quick results, and we'll start to see more and more travel picking up. It's a fact, because people don't like to be contained. And Sagittarius energy is about adventurism. It's about being very independent. And last year was very much about being locked in, which was very uncomfortable for many of us, because above all else, Sagittarius energy is about individual freedom. So this year is a very, very exciting year. It does give us an opportunity to bounce back. It's not going to be without big challenges. We do have a very pressing right angle between Saturn and Uranus, the two rulers of Aquarius, which is going to go on to about the 31st of July. It comes back from around about the last 5 days of November to the end of the year. And that's a really difficult aspect, I feel, because Uranus, of course, is in the sign of Taurus, and that's very much to do with resisting change. Taurus likes continuity, whereas Uranus likes to shake things up. So our attitude to the earth, environmentalism, how we live, how we consume, which Taurus energy is very much about as well. It's what we enjoy eating, drinking, spending our money on. Bit of luxury. All of us love a bit of luxury. But that's being tempered by this potential new world order that Jupiter and Saturn initially are bringing in the sign of Aquarius, plus that solar eclipse energy that really came in with such a hurtling ferocity in its wonderful trine with Mars on the 14th of December. We've had Venus move in mid-month December into the sign of Sagittarius. So it's a much freer, looser energy as we come into this new year. But stay with me now to get the inside track on your zodiac sign, because I really feel that this is a year that we need to be informed about like no other. Hello Sagittarius, and welcome to your in-depth video forecast for 2021. If you'd like to discover what this year would hold for you personally, based on your time, date and place of birth, please see the link beneath this video. You can order your 12-month forecast and character analysis, which will give you detailed insights into when to make your moves. And if you order in 2020, I'll give you the rest of the year free. If you order in 2021, I'll give you from the point of the order a full 12-month forecast. Now, in terms of your overall situation, the most exciting news is that there was a solar eclipse in your sign on the 14th of December. And this forged a really enabling angle to Mars. Mars is the planet of drive, it's the planet of action, and it's in, as this year begins, the most perfect part of your situation in terms of self-expression. It's also forging a quite delightful angle to Venus in your sign. So that suggests that you're going to be much more action orientated this year, Sagittarius. And I'm really sharing this forecast with a lot of love, because I feel the last couple of years particularly has probably been quite bruising as far as your self-esteem, your self-worth, and also your income is concerned. But there's a big shift this year, and it does start off with this new solar eclipse series, which is going to go on for the next couple of years between your sign and your opposite sign of Gemini. So it's about balancing your individuality with your relationships. It is going to give you, as you can see at the turn of the year with Mars's superb angle to Venus, a chance to pull so much goodness to you. You're going to have a real enhanced sex appeal. And also, if you're a creative person, your creative juices are going to be flowing so much more. Of course, at the turn of every year, we have the solar return, all the planetary positions, and the Sun is in its usual sign of Capricorn. So I do feel that you're going to be thinking about resources. You still have Pluto here too, which has been there since 2008. And if you think back over the last, what would be now 13 years, you probably have really changed your outlook quite a lot in how you earn money. And that's all with Pluto's help, even if sometimes it seems to take down the things that we've relied upon. But as you begin this new year, it is true to say that Mars is in a right angle with Pluto. So your desire to be more self-expressive could see you quite impatient for progress. And I really couldn't blame you for that, because I feel, as I said, it's been so frustrating for you. But it is also saying to you, this right angle, that you can't push too hard. It's like almost running within your own natural pace. If you try to sprint too quickly, it could actually be counterproductive. So set your sights for the whole 12 months, because progress is really possible. And part of the reason for that, Sagittarius, is that, as you probably know, your ruler Jupiter has moved out of its 12-year cycle through the sign of Capricorn, where inevitably the wider financial environment tends to suffer. And it's moved into the very democratic sign of Aquarius, which shares quite similar values to your sign of freedom and independence. Now also Saturn has moved out of Capricorn into the sign of Aquarius, and the two are closely nestled together as this new year begins. This is really exciting stuff. Now, of course, Saturn is about restriction, and the sign of Aquarius is a sign that it co-governs, so it's the co-regent of Aquarius. And I think it's going to be asking you over the next couple of years to become much more conscious of how you express your ideas, your knowledge generally, your belief systems. If some of these are outdated, this could be the area that you have to work on. There can also be, in some ways, perhaps tensions in terms of your immediate locality, perhaps with siblings. It's possible that how you go about expressing yourself, other people could let you know in some ways that they don't entirely approve all of the time. So there's always a lesson with Saturn, and I don't want you to be too worried about it, because having Jupiter alongside suggests that there's real opportunities as well. Now, Jupiter and Aquarius haven't been together in a conjunction like this since the 1400s. It's that rare. So it's all going to be a bit new and different for us all. And Aquarius energies is essentially about truth. And you can be quite a truth-seeking person, sometimes rightly to the point and direct. Sometimes people would say a little blunt. But the opportunity to transform your ideas and your thinking, or to use your knowledge in a positive way, suggests that you could thrive as a teacher, a trainer, a life coach. Anything to do with publishing a blog or technology can really see you thrive this year, but you are going to have to put in the application and the perspiration, which is of course what Saturn is very much about. Now also at the turn of this year, the moon is in your sister fire sign of Leo, which means that knowledge, something that's very precious to every Sagittarius, but also travel, could be something that you're really yearning to engage with again this year. Because of COVID-19, restriction has been something that we've all had to get used to, even if it's been something that's been quite an uncomfortable reality. Now, I feel there are still going to be some restrictions this year. I don't feel it's just going to be a green light where a vaccine comes out and everyone engages with that opportunity and everyone starts going back to travelling in the way they used to. I think the combination of Saturn and Jupiter is actually going to see a shift in the way that society thinks and operates. And there's going to be some people who are very open to the change and some who resist it. And I think in your case, because you can be very much an inquisitive person, being able to travel and break out is something that gives you the oxygen of life. But unfortunately, that moon position is in opposition to Saturn. So there is likely to still be some local lockdowns at the very least. I think there are going to be more technologies coming in to treat COVID, either through vaccines for the people who choose to take it, or through better testing, better track and trace, better technology, better systems, so that we can get things moving again. But I do think it's going to be a bit stop-start based on your particular situation. But the midpoint between the moon and the sun for you puts that midpoint, the balance between your drive and your more receptive energies, in the sign of Libra, which is about friendship. I think you're going to be making some new friends this year, or perhaps changing things up a little bit in your approach to the type of ideals you have and the groups and the belief systems that they have that you're drawn to. So it doesn't mean that all your friends are going to change, but I think there could be a freshening up, and it's something I'm just alerting you to. But most of all, I feel that glorious energy that's coming from that solar eclipse of the 14th of December is really going to give you an appetite to take a firmer grip on your life direction, to be more decisive. And I just feel that Saturn and Jupiter are suggesting that you may have to recalibrate your thinking in some way, but that can be exciting in a positive way too. So where are the challenges? Well, Pluto does continue in your sector of resources, and it is squaring with Mars in your sector of passion and being free-spirited and self-expressive. So there could be a part of you that instantly wants to have much greater engagement with life's pleasures, whether it's through socializing, through any kind of entertainment sector involvements, or it could be that you just could find yourself more risk-taking this year. And because Saturn and Jupiter are in conjunction, it's important to check out the information to make sure that any risks you take are calibrated on the chance of reward. So don't be too gung-ho in your approach, I think, is the overarching message. But also by the middle of January, Saturn and Uranus are in a square, and that's going to go on through till the end of July. And I have to be honest with you, Uranus, the planet of restlessness, is in your sector of work and health and where you provide services to others. And if that's an area that you do feel very uncertain around, I think your thinking in that area, if you find that you can't quite find or discover the opportunity that you want straight away, could lead you to feel quite frustrated and on edge. So that could go on through till the end of July. So just be aware that you need to run at a speed that you can sustain. Don't go too quickly. That's really the message of this year. However, by the end of January, Mercury, the planet of communication, goes into a retrograde, and broadly to the 11th of March, that's asking you to really study, do your research, and be very meticulous about any exchanges of information, emails, letters, anything that you might be involved with where you have to back up what you're claiming. It needs to be factually correct, so just proceed with a bit of caution. But Mars does move on the 7th of January into the sign of Taurus, and it does join up with Uranus on the 18th and 19th of January. And if you are feeling particularly penned in a job, that could be a couple of days where you may do something completely dramatic. You may even decide to leave something if it really is impinging on that sense of freedom that's so important to you. But I wouldn't be inclined to be too impetuous. Again, remember the long-term plan. But as you're working into this year, Jupiter, your ruler, does move in the middle of May into your home zone, and it's going to be there through to the 6th of July. Don't be surprised if you change something about your home. It could be that you want to put something new into it, a new kitchen, a new bathroom, perhaps a new study, or perhaps it's going to be technology. You're going to work from home, update your systems in some way, or it could be for some Sagittarius people that you're going to move altogether. Now that brings us through to the 26th of May, and the lunation which occurs then is in your opposite sign. And I think if a relationship needs some attention, it may require you to really concentrate at that point and to be conscious of exactly what the other person wants for you, because this is going to be squaring up with Jupiter at that time in the sign of Pisces. So it's going to be important to keep a sense of perspective. That takes us through to the solar eclipse on the 10th of June, which is also in Gemini. But this provides a wonderful opportunity in the second half of this year for your relationships to thrive. If you're single, this really sets the stage for you to perhaps change your status and meet someone who really captures your imagination. Is there a gotcha? There is, because Neptune, the planet of dreams, is in a T-square between the location of the Sun in the sign of Gemini, and this is going to provide a potential confusion. There may be someone that you're drawn to, for example, who seems to really tick all your boxes, but there may be something about them that you don't know at the outset. So again, it's kind of saying don't dismiss it, proceed, but with a degree of caution. But generally, your relationship prospects are given a massive boost in the second half of this year, and I do feel that you're going to be feeling much freer about things. I feel that the pushback against COVID is really going to be coming through at a pace, and that's something that we're all going to be welcoming. Now there is a Mercury retrograde involved in that solar eclipse as well. In a contractual sense, particularly about a property matter, if anyone makes a claim, it is going to be really important to scrutinise that claim to make sure that they're not telling you something, even unintentionally, that actually may not be true. So just be cautious about that. But as we come into the autumn and we have the lunar eclipse, which occurs on the 19th of November, this for you is very much about the hidden side of life. It could be that there's someone at work that you can't quite get a feel for what they're about. There could be a bit of mystery. It's possible also that your physical vitality could take a little bit of a dip. Don't worry, because on the 4th of December, along comes another solar eclipse in your sign, which is going to reinforce that potential for your individuality. And remember, from the end of from July to the end of the year, all but 3 days, Jupiter is in a fabulous location for you, really giving you the chance to exchange information, have some bubbly encounters, be flirty, but also inspire people with your mode of communication. If you sing or you write, you could capture someone's imagination in a big way this year. So generally 2021 is going to be a chance for you to have a lot more self-confidence, a lot more energy is going to be flowing through you. The limitations over your resources are going to make way for many more opportunities. It is true that you may have to go through some changes, some practical changes, and there could be some times this year when emotionally you do feel a little bit disorientated in the way that has become a bit of a theme since 2012. It's all about Neptune. Do as much reading as you can about Neptune in the 4th house, and that will help you to understand where to give yourself a little bit of leeway, cut yourself some slack. If you do feel a bit overwhelmed or very hypersensitive at times, it's fine. But generally this is going to be a year of much greater sociability, much greater interactivity, a much greater potential to earn money in the way you want. It's just not forcing the pace, not trying too hard, having the confidence in the outcome. Because if you set your mind to it, you can overcome so many obstacles that have been so immense for you over the last couple of years. And most of all, just how you feel about yourself. So I'm wishing you all the very best, Sagittarius. I really am truly excited for you. Take care, stay safe, and goodbye for now.